guess there's a few people that weren't here yesterday. I'll just do a brief introduction, but most of you know me. So I'm with Summit 7, we're a managed service provider, and we specialize in Microsoft GCC High. On our team, we're a fairly large shop, one of the first to become CMMC Level 2, and I believe we have 10 CCAs and 27 CCPs, about 300 employees. So I have a deep bench, and I'm very lucky. I gotta tell you, I'm very, very lucky that I have a deep bench. I wanted to ask if we could have those in the room that have a CCA raise your hands again. We had some of you yesterday. I think that, is Kyle here? He might be out there in the lobby.
He's in training.
Okay, all right, very good. Yeah, because I'm going to be talking through a mock assessment, but also a bunch of different kinds of assessments, and I don't want my perspective to be the only one. I want you guys to ask a lot of questions, like really feel like this is your hour to uncover and ask questions about the process of basically practicing for your CMMC Level 2 assessment. So I'm going to be using my own laptop, going a little differently, because I find that when I teach the CCP and CCA classes, if I get rid of the slides and I open up a spreadsheet, everyone gets all, oh, I'm going to sit up and pay attention. So I also have some PDFs, that's right. We're going outside slide boundaries today, folks. So let's have some fun with this. We have about an hour. We're going to enjoy it, all right? So first of all the different types of assessments that are out there, what are their purpose and what kind of value might you have in having like a practice run through of your C3PAO assessment? So we're going to start there. We're going to move into the CAP document, and we brought this up a couple of times. Mike Snyder mentioned it a couple times as well. I'm going to show you the CAP. Who here has not seen the CAP before? If you're fairly new on your journey, you may not have seen it. It's really important to understand this document, and so we're going to talk through that. Actually, when you take the CCP exam, 25% of the score is focused on understanding the CAP document. So anybody that has, wants to get the fundamental 5-day boot camp knowledge of the CCP, know that 25% of that time is spent on this one document that's only 29 pages long. So it's a big deal, all right? And then exam and interview test. We're going to have some fun around my experience and why it's so important to prepare for the assessment, including a personal foible of my own. So we'll get started on that. So different types of assessments. When you first start on your journey, you generally are going to do a gap assessment. I spoke about this briefly yesterday, but it's a understanding of, here's the NIST 800-171A document, controls. There's 110 controls with 320 assessment objectives, right? And here is our existing security on our network as we understand it. And this is a kind of understanding now where your CUI flows already and what the scoping is, and you're going to compare the two and come up with a gap analysis. So a basic gap analysis is generally always going to be used at the outset of your journey. But there's another thing farther along that is like a mock assessment, but it allows for you to receive feedback from a third party. And the reason that I'm going to talk about this is that this is what I did for my company. It's like a full C3PAO assessment. I mean, you start at AC, access control, and you end with SI, system integrity. You go through every single one of those controls, every assessment objective, with somebody that is at a assessor level to be able to talk through what it is that you've implemented and let them help you uncover any existing gaps that you might still have that you weren't aware of. So I don't know if that's called a mock assessment, a gap assessment, but what happened was there was a clarification issued from the Cyber AB and the Department of War that said, when you say mock assessment from now on, you are to refer to that as a C3PAO doing a early review, a full review of all of your evidence interviewing people just like it's a real assessment, but they're not allowed to give you any feedback. So they can say, that's not adequate or sufficient. I'm going to have to mark that one as not met, but they can't tell you how to fix it and make suggestions for improvement. So the term mock assessment actually is what that is. And when I was asked to do this session by Steve, he said, Joy, will you do a mock assessment? There's still a lot of people in the community that think a mock assessment is I'm going to stand up here with somebody that's an assessor and I'm going to act like I'm the one that's going through the assessment and show them my evidence, and the assessor's going to say whether it's met or not met, and we're going to do role playing. I don't know that that's as valuable for this group right now as me talking through the different kinds of assessments and what you can expect. So we're going to do a little bit of a different take on it. And then there's the self-assessment. Now the self-assessment, it's important to understand, you're supposed to do the same level of effort in a self-assessment as you would if a team of assessors were walking in your door and validating the controls. That's how you avoid the Department of Justice knocking on your door because you posted a score of 110 in the SPRS system that actually is not representing your security posture. So if you are as detailed in a self-assessment as you would be with an assessor sitting across from the table from you, that's what a full self-assessment is. And you can use the experience of either a mock assessment, a for-record C3PAO assessment, a gap assessment. Use any of those experiences to kind of judge what kind of resources do I need to do on an annual basis for my self-assessment. You're going to have that same level of effort. So just something to consider. Now I just talked through, the red font, maybe not a good choice. It says the same thing as the prior slide, but now I want you to help me out here. Which of those kinds of assessments might you do if you are level 1? Level 1 self-assessment. Raise your hand if you think that you should do a gap assessment for level 1. Okay, about half of you are raising your hand. Half of you may still be asleep, I'm not sure. All right, how about a mock assessment? Doing a full run through with the C3PAO where they're not providing any kind of feedback for you. One hand up, thumbs down. All right, well, you don't have to be aggressive about it. All right. How about the self-assessment? Pretty much everybody, yeah. Level 1 is a self-assessment, but I also like the people who raise their hand for the gap analysis, the gap assessment, because you really need to do a gap assessment, right? The self-assessment, again, even at level 1, even if it's 17 controls or 15 now based on the FAR clause, you want to be interviewing people, collecting evidence, going through how you've implemented these controls, documenting it well, making sure you have a policy or a procedure for everything that you're doing. You need to be that detailed. If I were you, when I finish, I would protect the repository of all of that evidence that backs up my score that I'm uploading into the SPRS and put it in a folder that says do not touch. All right, retain that. Because if you show in good faith, if there's an inquiry for even at level 1, if you show in good faith that you went to that kind of trouble, you're going to be that much farther ahead of a big penalty, okay? So let's get a little bit more clarity on a mock assessment when I tell you that normally it's a C3PAO would do it, right? I was talking with Kyle Lai. He was up here yesterday, great guy. And by the way, he put up a slide with some free resources. And I don't know how many of you saw that, but those are some valuable free resources. Like, it's really awesome, this community that Steve has pulled together that's giving a lot of great information. So normally the C3PAO is going to do it. No consulting involved, met, not met. They might ask additional questions that will help you understand what they're trying to get to, but they're not going to say you need to pull up the Intune screen and go to this portal, this part of it, and show me what Defender is doing. They're not going to give you that kind of consulting advice, right? They generally are going to give you 4 to 12 weeks after they finish that mock assessment where they have given you no advice, no consulting, and they're going to agree with you, all right, when you're done, when all these things that are not met, that we captured, are ready, we're going to come back and we're going to do the for record official C3PAO assessment of you. All right? And normally they're going to discount that slightly over the full rate that they would charge for the full assessment anyways. Now, I don't know about you guys, if you're looking around at each other going, that's expensive. Yeah, it is. It is expensive. CMMC is expensive. There's no cutting corners around that. One of the slides yesterday, I think it was Jerry Leishman was talking about the fact that most other types of industries where they've been audited on a regular basis, they have 6 to 12% of their budget goes to their cybersecurity, and historically in all the defense industrial base, it's like way less than 6%, some as low as 2%. So, this is what's driving these kinds of costs. But this is a really valuable process, and one of the things that I want to point out is that you have now formed a relationship with the assessors. Think about that. The same assessors are going to come back. They've already gone through every piece of evidence, every policy, every procedure with you, asked you questions, right? They're going to come back after you've closed that remediation. They're going to sit down at the table and you're going to say, Kyle, it's nice to see you again. You know who's walking in the door. You know how they ask the questions, right? They're already familiar with who they're going to be getting the answers from. So it should go fairly smooth. Anyone disagree with that? Did you want to?
I just want to ask, I think you just answered the question. So is it a guarantee that if I'm doing a mock assessment with the C3PAO that I will have the same assessor for the real assessment as for the mock assessment? Is that an assumption?
I don't know that there's a guarantee. Everyone that I have spoken to, that is what they have done. So that may be something that you can pre-negotiate in advance. Just make sure that that's very clear in your contract, right? Regardless, most assessor teams under the same C3PAO are going to be fairly similar, but there is a level of comfort. It's like when you have an ISO audit and the same ISO auditor comes back every year, you've got a relationship with them. All right, so a prep or a gap assessment, this is my version of a mock. This is what I did at Summit 7. And we were completely ready. We thought, all right, we're like 4 weeks out from the actual C3PAO walking in the door, and I picked 2 people on my team that were CCAs that had nothing to do with all of the implementation, all the prep that my team had been doing, all the gathering of the evidence. They were completely focused on other things, and they came in as if they were assessors because they're CCAs. And they started the firing all the questions at us, right? And we went through the entire thing. So in this kind of a assessment, and do this when you think you're 100% ready. Give yourself some room to do it before the actual C3PAO walks in. It can be a RPO, like Mike Snyder just said in his last session. If you're using an RPO for a mock assessment or this kind of a prep assessment, make sure they have CCPs, preferably CCAs, on their staff who are doing this with you, who are actually on the assessor side, not just the implementation side. Okay? It could be a different group of internal people, like I leveraged, as long as they have assessment experience and we're not involved in the implementation. And what we really are going for is a fresh pair of eyes, because we all have these goggles on for, we think how we did it meets everything. Hopefully, that's what you're thinking by the time that you're ready. But the fact and the difference here is that they can provide consulting. They can say to you, I wouldn't have all of those tabs open on the browser. Or I'll give you some examples when we get a little deeper in for how easy it is to make mistakes, and why the examine, interview, test part of this talk is something that I'm actually really excited to be sharing. Those will be similar in cost to a full C3PAO assessment. I mean, it's, if you do it directly with the C3PAO, you get no feedback, you're still paying about 75%. That's an average, but every C3PAO is going to be different. If you're doing it with a different entity, you can do it with a different C3PAO. You can have one do a full run through, and I participated on one of those teams for a very big prime, and they thought they were ready to go. So they had a different C3PAO come in than the one that was going to be doing their assessment. I was on the first team. We went in and they had negative under 100 as their score because they were relying on an MSP who had been kind of fudging about how ready they were the entire time. So come to find out, it was a vehicle for them to fire the MSP. But you don't want to rely on especially if you're in a larger company, you don't want to rely on people just saying that they're ready. Do the run through, the entire run through. It's going to be a super valuable experience for you. So do it at least 60 days in advance. Mine was 30 days in advance. Like I said, I have a fairly large team though, so we knew that we'd be able to close any gaps pretty quickly. So why would you want to do it? Demonstrating confidence and showing how organized you are in your ability to whip out that evidence, talk through it. An assessor might say, I don't have any processes included in your documentation for this, and you're saying, oh, no, that's already uploaded in its document named blah, 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 item number, blah, blah, blah. Like your stuff is the thing. You've practiced this and you really know your stuff for every single control. That kind of confidence, you'll see like the AC domain, the access control domain, that has a lot. It's one of the larger, if not the largest, domain families of controls. And they start with that on the assessment. You might spend a day, you might spend a couple of days just getting through one family of controls. You feel like you had the beat out of you. But the reason that they do that is because if you are showing really good evidence as you go through access control and you're speaking intelligently to it, the assessors start to get a level of confidence in you. And they might follow up with a couple questions and you don't even know it, but they're actually checking off other assessment objectives and other controls as you're talking, and they're starting to make pretty good headway. And that can speed up some of the other domain families. All right? So what you are demonstrating up front kind of sets a tone. The run-through is going to allow you to identify two things: weak people, weak evidence. The people part of that is super important. And Mike had alluded to that, about that sometimes a CIO will say, I'm gonna talk through this on behalf of my company because I'm the one ultimately responsible. I don't know about you guys, but most CIOs are not really in touch with the day-to-day operations of the business. And their version of what an assessor wants to see and what the assessor is actually expecting from the practitioner who does that could vary pretty drastically. So making sure that you identify how different people may need to be replaced when it comes to presenting evidence or coached is a really important thing. And it signals to your company stakeholders that you're taking this really seriously. This is a very loud move for you to make, because these stakeholders have invested a lot of money and resources, and you getting to the point where the C3PAO sits down on day one of that assessment, they want to know that their money is being spent well. So a lot of times, if they need to spend a little bit more money for a full run through and know that you're going to ace it, they're going to look at that and say, I think that maybe that's important. Now I'm going to share with you some shocking numbers. I don't want everyone to get up and walk out. Please don't do that. We specialize in GCC High. We have 1,100 plus customers in the defense industrial base. GCC High is not inexpensive, but not just Summit 7. Many of the companies who do what we do, Help Desk Cavalry, it's always sticker shock when companies understand what does moving your data to the government cloud mean. Just a licensing alone for one seat could be $800, $1,000 for one person, right? So, when I said, well, I'm gonna pull several managed service providers and implementers and see what they think the cost is to get an organization ready for CMMC. A lot of times this involves being able to maintain it on an ongoing basis, leveraging managed services, right? So let's just say you have a 150 person team and it costs you $200,000 to get ready for CMMC. That's all the licensing, all of the configuration of all the devices, getting the policies done, the procedures, creating all your evidence, all that. All of the blood, sweat, and tears. And then you're gonna spend at least $50,000 most often for the C3PAO to come in and assess you. If it even gets to the point where the C3PAO looks at your preliminary evidence, and you'll see what I mean with that in just a minute, if it even gets to that point, you're now in for $250,000 just to kick off the assessment, right? Just to kick it off, not knowing if you're gonna pass. So my question is, how much of that are you willing to gamble? That's why it's so important to do a prep assessment, a mock assessment, if you will, either with the C3PAO or a separate entity that can really scrutinize this for you. So this is where I'm going to switch now using Jeremy. It was window what? Window tab?
Alt tab.
Alt tab. I learned something new today. CMMC Assessment Process. So this document, I don't know if you can see on the far right, but it's 29 pages. Just looking at the table of contents, getting through phase 1, the pre-assessment. This is before you've officially started your assessment with all the assessors on Teams or Zoom or whatever, and all of your people in your conference room, or everybody's all together physically in person. Before you even do any of that, you are 16 pages into a 29-page document. This is where most of the organizations stop, because the C3PAO says clearly, you are not ready. Imagine the disappointment. Imagine your stakeholders. What do you mean you're not ready? We don't have numbers published yet from the Cyber AB for how many assessments have started to get through this pre-assessment phase and then paused because they can't move forward. The assessor is not going to let you proceed if they know for certain you're going to fail. They're not going to waste your $50,000, $80,000, $300,000. They're not going to do that. They're going to take a cursory look at everything that you've put together, and they're going to say, all right, we can proceed. But keep in mind, there's a waiting list. Now you have a scheduling nightmare. All right, we know that we're not going to be able to proceed. They haven't been able to give you any advice on how to fix anything they see is wrong. But like Kyle Lai said, or one of the presenters yesterday, if you give them a 20-page SSP, they're going to hand it back to you and say, you're not even ready for phase 1, right? You don't want to find out at that point that you didn't spend your money and resources wisely to get ready. So I like the CAP document so much that I'm actually now on the committee to help rewrite it with the Cyber AB, and I'm very excited about that because I teach this damn thing like so many times in my CCP classes. But the reason that I like it so much is that it hadn't been shared out to the public. It was only shared with assessors, like a top secret document. It hadn't been shared out until December of last year. I had been teaching it for 4 or 5 years to CCPs, and they weren't allowed to share it with the organizations who are actually getting assessed. So now that you have it available to you, I want you to look at this like your consumer protection guide, okay? Because you should read this cover to cover and know exactly what you're going to expect when the assessor sits down for the readiness phase and starts asking you for things. Don't be surprised. Read in advance. This is your advanced notes on what the test is going to look like. All right? So make sure that you do that. Let's see here. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right. So part of this is there's a section in the CAP called Roles and Responsibilities. I color-coded these in blue and yellow, but basically the yellow is your organization and blue is the assessor, the C3PAO firm. There's some key roles that you have to identify in your own company. The reason I'm pointing this out now is that there's this thing called the OSC Point of Contact, POC, another acronym. The POC is really a crucial person, and generally it's not going to be like the CIO, the CEO, somebody like that. It's somebody like Teresa. Where'd you go, Teresa? Like Teresa, who knows her organization inside out, has helped prepare for this all along. Teresa has gone to every person in her company who might need to produce a piece of evidence and make sure that she understands that evidence, and then she knows who needs to speak to that evidence during the assessment. So the point of contact is going to be logistically arranging for the schedule. Where are we going to be doing it? Are we all going to sit in a conference room together? Are we going to all be on our own Zoom or Teams, from our desks? So the point of contact is a really crucial person that has to know things inside out. That's an important one for you to identify and plan for up front, all right? The affirming official is generally going to be the CIO or the CEO. The affirming official for the organization is really, it's their butt on the line, that once you guys pass and you get your certification, it's their butt, their personal name is on the line as an official of the company, generally C-suite, right? As an official of the company, I swear and hold true that everything that we presented to you is factual, we didn't fabricate anything. Their name goes along with the documentation, all right? So, when we're looking at that, just a little more information. By the way, all of our slides are going to be made available. So, just understanding how important it is to have the right POC. And by the by, at Summit 7, some of our customers are like, I don't want to be the POC. I want it. I don't know enough about it. So we're like, okay, we'll do that for you. And some MSPs are able to do that because they have such intimate familiarity with your environment. Some of them aren't. Make sure that you totally trust that person to be able to serve in that capacity. And it should be written in contract language. They're going to be your POC. You don't ever want a third party, any external service providers, to act on your behalf without having contract language behind that. And also, the C3PAO, if they see that this person is not an employee of your company, they're going to be like, why are you having me talk to somebody that's not in your company? The assessment is of your company, right? So the C3PAO has to know that they are authorized to speak on your behalf and do these activities. All right, now we're going to have some fun. We're going to get into the evidence, examine, interview, and test. And that's another reason I want you to read the CAP document, because it gives you a lot of information. If you go to the CMMC Level 2 Assessment Guide, it's going to give you examples of what you would put forward for examine, who you would put forward for interview, and then the types of activities that generally an assessor might ask to see for test. It will give you that for every single control in the assessment guide. The CAP document, the CMMC Assessment Process document, also will give you a lot of information on this. Examine is always going to be about documentation. A lot of examination takes place by the assessors before they start the actual assessment with you. They'll ask you 10 days in advance, upload your SSP, all of your policies, all of your procedures, screenshots, what have you. And they're going to dive in. I know that when I do these, I need them at least 4 days in advance, because I'll spend a really fun weekend reading the SSP. And then we start on Monday morning, and I've got some questions prepared already, right? So a lot of the C3PAOs will do that. But when it comes to the documentation, I'm going to talk you through just a couple of things I found that have been really, really good. First of all, you can present a list of these are my assets, the different asset categories. Or you can do a pretty picture. Now I grayed out a lot of this. This is our actual Summit 7. So we actually have pictures of the people that are in the purple block for the CUI assets, right? We've got who are our technologies, the ones that are in the cloud, the ones that we have on premise. Those are our CUI, which facilities do we have that are CUI facilities. And then on the right-hand side, we have security protection assets or security protection components. And who are the people that are performing a security protection function? What kinds of technologies, cloud, on-prem? What do we consider to be a CRMA, customer risk managed asset? What do we consider to be out of scope? All right. And that's just an example. But you will want to have a full SSP, all of your policies, all of your procedures ready to go. And here's another tricky thing that I learned. If you use a GRC platform, like we have a scale pad at the back here, every GRC platform out there does things differently. Every one. And a lot of folks are uploading everything to their GRC platform and saying, all right, we're ready for the assessors. Well, then the assessor, the C3PIO says, all right, upload all of your evidence to this portal. And you're like, but it's all in my portal. And the assessor's like, but I want it in my portal. And so you have to work this out. Where's the evidence going to be uploaded to? How are they going to access it? And how your GRC tool, after you spend all that time putting all your evidence in your GRC tool, how it spits it back out so that you can upload it to the assessor teams, maybe something you want to know well in advance. So maybe do a practice run of the export, right? So that you can see what that comes out to look like. Do I have any, I know that several of you have helped companies do implementations or assessments. Is there any other information anyone wants to add to that? Don't let it be just my voice. Yeah, Daniel.
Tying the operations to evidence production as part of the operation. So if I know that certain tickets are going to be if I know that certain tickets are going to be my evidence, I know, and so I should make sure that the tickets contain not only the resolution, but the actual evidence. If I needed to change a configuration, do a screenshot, put it in the ticket, so that when you generate the evidence, it's all there. You don't need to go and hunt for it. That was the big lesson that I had from assessments that I had to prepare for.
Yeah, that's very good. So the example that Daniel's speaking to is that a lot of us are able to track our evidence by proving not just that we have the policy and the procedure, but then this is how we did it. And the how we did it part is that they've captured a service ticket from their internal IT or from their outsourced MSP, it doesn't matter. But the detail in that ticket needs to give the assessor confidence that, oh yeah, everything you say you do in the procedure actually happened here. So make sure that you are attaching print screens and things like that. The most important thing that you're going to be providing up front, and that you want to do that mock assessment or the preparation assessment against, is the system security plan. This is where you will catch items that haven't been detailed to the extent that they should. Now there's a control 312.4 that is about the system security plan. And remember yesterday when I was saying that all of the controls for CMMC have a 1, 3, or 5 point weight associated with them depending on the severity? The SSP is the only exception to that. Literally, if your SSP doesn't pass, you don't pass. It's not even that it's a 5, it's that if you don't have the SSP in order, you don't pass. It should have a red color block behind it. But the SSP, if you go to 312.4, it will tell you all the contents, everything that needs to be in that SSP. It's not just a description of how you've implemented each control. It has to have a CUI data flow diagram, a network diagram, making sure that you've outlined what types of asset categories you have. Really, this is the opening introduction to your business. That's why an assessor like me is going to spend a few days up front reading it and understanding it And if we have questions about your scope, those questions should always stem from what we're finding in the SSP, because your scope should be described in there. Your business should be described in there. External service providers need to be described in there.
Excuse me, Joy. I'm sorry. I was gonna ask a question earlier.
Oh, yeah.
But now, perfect. So you're just talking about scoping. One thing I was gonna ask about is vendors being scoped in, especially if they're pertinent or relevant to the CUI, like creation of CUI or facilitation of it. Like, let's say they're a client, or if the person who's being assessed, they have an external vendor who then needs to sort of have their conditions flow down to them, even though they're not a part of this, right? So that's just not what I'm saying here. Like, I think that's like one of the few things is checking for your vendors who may not be up to par what you may need them to do before you get assessed.
No. So I think that if I understand the question correctly, they're not going to validate who flowed the data to you before you get assessed?
No.
No?
No, I'm saying like as a consideration, what documentation needs to be ready. I'm asking like, would you include vendors as a part of this to be documented?
A vendor's documentation, like one of your cloud service providers?
So yeah, something like
Yes.
Right.
So I do. I uploaded the actual FedRAMP body of evidence for our cloud service providers along with my evidence, so that the assessor could see that not only did we include the detail of that in our system security plan, but we have the actual evidence.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was unclear.
No, it's not you at all. It's me and my latte coffee. All right. And then the asset inventory, making sure that you've included at least a link to the most up-to-date asset inventory or an actual printout of it, so that the assessor can talk through that. Now, one of the free tools that I mentioned that Kyle offered up yesterday is this. It's called the CMMC Assessment Playbook. And I actually filled out his little form on his website so that I could make sure it's the exact same thing that I'm showing you right now. This is Kyle's that I downloaded this morning for free. So where is Kyle? Did he come back in? There, stand up, Kyle. That's the man that you want to harass when I finish. He had a bunch of resources on his site. This is just one. So this is actually going to talk through every single control and assessment objective, and it states in column G, evidence type, what the assessor is expecting to receive from you to validate that. Is it a document? Is it a screen share? Is it a list of some kind, right? And then assessment considerations, and then those are like further questions that the assessor is being prompted to think about and talk to you about. Make sure as you go through this in preparation for your assessment, go back to my slide, that you're considering all the different types of assets that you'll have. A lot of mistakes are made, and one of the things that you'll catch in a run-through of the assessment is that technical people tend to focus on the technology that they use. And so there's a ton of evidence put forward for like Microsoft GCC High, but not so much evidence for something like the camera system or the visitor badge system. So there is a world outside of Microsoft GCC High where people actually have a lot of CUI or security protection asset data or controls, and it's just not, you're not thinking about that when you're doing these things. So always be cognizant doing these run-throughs. Well, what else? Let's not just think about our laptops and our servers, mobile devices, security protection, things like that you want to be capturing. Daniel?
So question, because this is something that's I think about a lot. So the way that what would you recommend would be the approach? Would you say, here are my assets and here are the specific controls that apply to them? Or as you describe every control, oh, and by the way, for this control, here are the assets the control applies to. Which way?
So it will be guided by the assessor, right? The assessor is going to go through the controls in the order that they are used to going through the controls. As they ask a question of you, and you're like talking through authorized users, and you also are showing at the same time a password policy or something like that, the assessor may jump over to another control and capture that evidence so that you're kind of killing two birds with one stone kind of a thing. But it's generally not up to the organization to say, we're gonna go through everything first with GCCI, then we're gonna go through everything first with our visitor entry system. It usually doesn't work that way because there's going to be crossover as they go through all of the controls. Does that make sense?
It does. I meant in my SSP. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. In my SSP, when I documented my SSP, so I have a section. Here are my assets.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be a good idea to say, oh, and by the way, here are the controls that apply to these assets? Because some of them, if it's a CUI asset, obviously all the controls apply. If it's CRMA, it may not be, etc. So would I want to be specific and specify which controls apply to the asset categories in the SSP, or leave it and say, oh, and here are the description of my controls in my SSP. Incidentally, here are the assets to which these controls apply.
So that's a pretty detailed question.
Fair.
I'm going to tell you that generally you're going to have to describe how every control is applied against every asset, if it's a CUI asset or an SPA asset, right? If it doesn't apply because the security protection asset actually can't even do that control, then you can skip that on that part of the SSPs you're going through. But the CRMAs and the SAs, the specialized assets, you'll want to do a full risk assessment against them and document those. So that's part of the information that you'll get in the scoping guide. And I think that when Kyle, when you get up and you guys do the C3PAO panel, you should ask that further question and get more people's perspective on it than mine. Okay? We know we need to be level 3, so we try to avoid anything with specialized assets or CRMAs, knowing that we're not going to be allowed to carry them up. All right, interview. So I've actually seen this. I've seen people that are like super professional and know their stuff inside out, and then when an assessor sits there and starts asking them questions, I have seen their hands start to shake, their voice starts to get like their clothes is closing up on them. They get really super nervous. And if they haven't ever been through an audit, you don't want this to be the first time. That's why a mock assessment or a prep assessment kind of a thing, going through the full run through is really important. And that shaking of the hands, and it tends to make other people in the room nervous as well, because everyone feels bad for the person, and then they want to kind of start to speak on that person's behalf. Like human nature is we want to help each other, right? So we want to get in front of these things with the people going through it. And as I mentioned about leadership, if they're not involved in the day-to-day, actually know how to do the hands-on, a lot of times they make a mess of it. I'm just going to be honest. So when you can, put a practitioner, the person who actually does the thing, in front of the assessor, opt for that. Opt for that. Teach them how to do it. Teach them how to be really good in an audit. One of the biggest rules is answer only what you're being asked. And I don't know about you, but I owned my MSP for 21 years, and my engineers loved to talk about their technology. You get them started, like they would be saying, they'd be talking to my customers so far above their head about, oh, I could do this and that, and you're like, kill it, scale it down a little bit. The assessors are listening to every word that's being said. And if they say something that doesn't quite align with something they just saw documented or somebody else just said, they're going to pause and they're going to ask to repeat it and drill on it. And now you're like, why did we let him talk, right? You need to know these things in advance. You need to really give some coaching to those kinds of people. And they're amazing people at what they do. They just are not maybe as amazing at understanding what an auditor's looking for. So I have some people on my team like that. And when we discovered in our run-through assessment, I'll call it, that who these people were, I took them under my wing, and I actually I gave them each control that they would be speaking to. We agreed on what the evidence was going to be, and I had them sit down and think about it and actually write out a script for how they would describe this to an assessor. And we kept narrowing it until it got to be where we wanted it to be. right? And then I had them go ahead and practice it out loud with me, not just say, oh yeah, I'll talk through this or I'll talk through that. And because you're not going to have them read a script in front of the assessor, but the fact that they took the time to write it out like that and then practice it with you over and as long as you need to keep practicing it with them. And then ask them random questions that an assessor would ask them and see how they respond. And then give them the feedback for it. I just want to say I'm a super, super big people person, and people that haven't been exposed in audits before that are nervous about this but that want to do it, bring them up so that they can do it. It's a big deal to be on the team that goes through an audit. A lot of these companies have never ever done this before. So if they really are bad at doing it and they don't want to, maybe there's someone that fills in for them during their vacations that you're like, okay, let's go ahead and have Brandy speak to it so that Lorraine doesn't have to, whatever that is, right? Maybe you do that. But if they want to participate, bring them up to the level where they can. It's a big deal. It does so much for their feeling included. All right. The assessor reaction, and this is something that I think is just so important to understand. Most of the time the assessor's not going to be on camera. It's just the little microphone you see, and they're going to ask the question, you're going to answer it, and they're going to be completely silent. And you're like, so human nature is that they didn't understand what I said, or I didn't give enough, so I'm going to say something else. And keep offering information until they tell me they have what they need. That human nature is actually going to get you in trouble in this situation. Assessors are sitting there taking a gazillion notes. They're doing the cover your ass routine. So they're taking lots of notes about exactly what they're seeing you show them, exactly what part of the policy or the procedure they're copying out, putting it in their notes. You know, they have to get your name, your title of who it was that said that. They're typing away in the background. Let them type, let them say, okay, now for the next one, right? Give them that breathing room. Don't get nervous, you did nothing wrong. So let them ask you for more information, right? And it's okay to ask for clarification. Assessors are human too, and I had a lot of fun with this during my assessment. When I had an assessor, they kept asking me the same thing the same way. He just was repeating the same sentence. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to figure this guy out. And so I would repeat back to him what I thought he was asking for in a different sentence. And he'd say, no, and he'd say his sentence again. And I'd say, all right, are you saying that you're looking for, and after like the fourth try, he's like, yes, exactly. And you know what I did? I said, thank you so much. I really want to make sure I'm giving you exactly what you're looking for. And he was totally cool with it, right? But don't assume, if you don't understand what they're asking, don't assume you can't ask more questions, right? You both want a win-win situation. He wants you to understand, she wants you to understand, so ask lots of questions. And when he was done, I said, thank you so much for your patience. I know that wasn't pretty, but we got there, right? All right, show me the money. This is the test part. Yeah.
You mentioned that the assessor probably is not on camera. Is the interviewee on camera, and are they required to be?
I don't think they're required to be. Yeah, they're not required to be, but I'll tell you where it gets hard is that if you have a bunch of people sharing one microphone in a conference room and they're not on camera, and the assessor's trying to figure out who just said that, right? So it's a little bit more difficult not being on camera in those scenarios. The assessor will be constantly saying, all right, and who just answered that question, right? So there you go. All right, so the artifacts, and we're in the home stretch, you guys. I promise not to bore you much longer. All right, so I had, especially the people who were going to be nervous, generally HR, the facilities people who administer firewalls, those kinds of people are not used to being around groups of people and demonstrating what they do very often. So I had them save their evidence in one folder on their desktop, open each piece of evidence, and open absolutely nothing else. Absolutely nothing else, all right? Have any portals pulled up logged in, ready to go. So a lot of technical people, they have to have multi-factor authentication. So, they sit there, they're asked a question, they log in, username, password. The password should be masked as they're typing it if they're already sharing their screen. Then they have to enter their MFA. This can be redundant and take a long time. So if you know that you're up next, open up all those portals, get them logged in, get just those tabs ready to go, right? You know that you're well organized. I have a screen grab is something cool too. And make sure everything else is closed. Now, I can't even stress this enough. Oh, I have a slide on it. But first of all, portal tabs. When I had my SOC, the assessor team said, well, show me this, show me that. And we had this young kid on our SOC that's only been with us like a year. And I have a little bit of a crush on him, I'm not gonna lie. He was so good. He actually, in Microsoft Edge, renamed his tabs according to the actual control number. You see that? I don't know if you guys can see that. But he had all of the controls lined up on his tabs, logged into the sites ready to go. And I was like, oh my God, look at this kid. So he's going places, I'll tell you. But this is a great example. Like the assessors themselves are like, do you have the control numbers on the tabs? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. So you have control of this. A lot of people get nervous. They're like, and this is my own foible that I did. I coached 22 people on my team. Prior to our CMMC assessment, you do not share your screen until you have the one thing up that you want the assessor to see, and when you're done talking through it, you unshare your screen. Well, while we were in our assessment, our FSO got called out on an emergency in the building, and so I was answering on her behalf. I shared out my screen, I opened one thing, oh, that was in it, closed it, opened another. One of my own team members goes, Joy, you are sharing your screen. I'm like, oh, I got called out on it. But when I am an assessor, I have seen things that people have opened a report, for example, on continuous monitoring. One of the controls is that you pick the most critical controls and you monitor them on a regular basis to make sure that they're functioning correctly. He had a spreadsheet that he's like, oh, maybe this is it. He opened this spreadsheet and it had a list of like 32 controls, and I said, oh, good. And he's like, oh yeah, I haven't seen this in a while. I said, number 17 there is, it was like a critical backup being tested. I said, let's take a look at that one. That says monthly. And the whole room, like every face turned white. They're like, we don't do that. They just didn't even try to lie. So should he have opened that report without knowing exactly what was on it? Should he have even had his screen shared while he was looking for what he was looking for? No, right? So the other thing is that the assessors aren't going to say exactly what they're looking for. They're not going to say, open up Intune and go to this dashboard, right? Yeah, they're going to say, that's not what I'm looking for. You're going to be going, okay. It's totally okay to mute the room, turn off the camera, and say, give us a minute, and talk amongst yourselves to see what ideas you have for what else it is that they may be looking for. You are in control of the assessment just as much as the assessor is, all right? The assessor's not going to say, I'm sorry, you've had 2 full minutes to talk through this, time's up. They're going to work with you, and they want you to understand it. So ask as many questions as you need to. So that's about what I got. That's my reason for going through a full run-through assessment. It's not zeroed in on just the mock assessment, but I wanted you all to have as much information as I can share around how you would prep for these assessments. And I hope that the information I've shared is helpful for you. So I think that we have a few minutes, for any additional questions. Like Steve said, there's no such thing as a dumb question. Yes. Lady with fabulous hair.
No
I'm
bar.
a little jealous, I'm not gonna lie.
Thank you, Joy.
Yeah.
Hey,
In one of the first screens you put up, you said in a pre-assessment, have these things ready, a network diagram, a data flow diagram. I don't recall that those were specifically called out in the CAP. Are they now specifically called out in the CAP, or is it just what you recommend assessors ought to?
It's what I recommend. You're not gonna find, I don't believe you're gonna find data flow diagram required as part of the SSP. I think the infrastructure map is. I'm looking at Kyle to say, is that?
Yeah.
But I'll tell you,
Yeah.
the data flow diagram is going to help you justify your scope and demonstrate to the assessor that you know exactly where your data lives.
Yes.
That's just at the outset, you wanna demonstrate that.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
All right, I'm here all day. If you have any questions, come find me. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joy.